Head, neck, and spinal injuries are serious. Without proper care, they can cause lifelong disability or death. Any time you suspect a person has a head, neck, or spinal injury, whether the victim is in water or on land, activate your facility's EAP to summon EMS and follow the general procedures for injury or sudden illness on land. When you suspect that someone on land has injured their head, neck, or spine, approach the victim from the front so they can see you without turning their head. Instruct the victim not to move and answer any questions verbally without nodding or shaking their head. Have the victim remain in the position in which they were found and protect them from further injury from others until EMS personnel assume control. Do not attempt to move the head or neck unless the victim is not breathing and you cannot maintain an open airway. If you encounter someone who is standing but has a suspected head, neck, or spinal injury, activate your facility EAP and have someone bring a chair over to the victim and have them sit so they don't fall. Minimize movement of the victim's head by telling them to remain still and avoid turning or twisting their head, neck, or back. Protect them from further injury and comfort them until more advanced help arrives. If the victim's condition becomes unstable and a chair is not available, slowly lower the victim to the ground with the assistance of other lifeguards. Try to limit excessive movement of the head, neck, or spine while the victim is being lowered. Head, neck, or spinal injuries are often caused by high-risk or high-impact activities, such as entering head first into shallow water, colliding with another swimmer, entering the water from a height, or striking the water with great impact. Always consider the mechanism of injury when deciding how to respond. Even if you believe a head, neck, or spinal injury may be present, we must also consider the presence of other life-threatening conditions. For example, is the victim breathing? Are they bleeding severely? Does the victim have a pulse? Your priority is to care for any life-threatening conditions. If at any time the victim is not breathing or has other life-threatening conditions, immediately remove the victim from the water and provide appropriate care. The head splint technique is used to perform manual inline stabilization for victims with a possible head, neck, or spinal injury in the water. The objective of the head splint technique is to minimize movement of the victim's head, neck, and spine. The head splint technique varies slightly based on the victim's location and position in the water and can be used when the victim is in shallow or deep water and at, near, or below the surface. To perform a head splint if the victim is in shallow water and face up at or near the surface, approach the victim from the side. Grasp the victim's arms midway between their shoulders and elbows and gently position the arms alongside their head, minimizing movement of the head and neck. Grasp the victim's right arm with your left hand and the victim's left arm with your right hand. Slowly and carefully squeeze the victim's arms against their head to help hold the head in line with the body. Do not move the victim any more than necessary. If the person is unresponsive, quickly look, listen, and feel to check to see if the person is breathing and call for a backboard.
I need a backboard.
Continue to monitor the victim's condition. With a face-up victim in deep water, the head splint technique is the same, except that you use a rescue tube for supporting during each step. For a victim who is face down at the water's surface, the head splint technique is slightly different. Whether in shallow or deep water, approach a face-down victim from the side. In deep water, use the rescue tube for additional support. Carefully grasp the victim's arms midway between their shoulders and elbows. Your right hand grasps the victim's right arm, and your left hand grasps the victim's left arm. Gently position the victim's arms alongside their head, minimizing movement of the head or neck. Squeeze the victim's arms firmly against their head to create inline stabilization. Glide the victim forward to raise the victim's legs and provide support during the turn. Turn the victim face up by pushing the victim's arm that is closest to you under the water and away from you, while pulling their other arm toward you across the surface. Continue to provide inline stabilization throughout the turn by squeezing the victim's arms tightly against their head. Position the victim with their head close to the crook of your arm and quickly look, listen, and feel to check for breathing if the person is unresponsive. Before placing the victim onto the backboard, switch to an overarm head splint position. When switching to an overarm head splint position, apply firm pressure with your outside arm to pull the victim toward your chest. Using the hand that is closest to your chest, reach over the victim and grab the victim's outside arm. Finally, release the hand that is under the victim and move it to the victim's arm that is against your chest and continue to apply pressure. Continue to monitor the victim's condition as you wait for help to arrive. To perform the head splint technique when the victim is submerged, approach the victim from the side, releasing the rescue tube if the victim is more than an arm's length beneath the surface. Grasping the victim's arms between their shoulders and elbows, gently position the victim's arms alongside their head and squeeze firmly to help hold the victim's head in line with their body. Begin to bring the victim to the surface at an angle while squeezing the victim's arms firmly against the head to maintain inline stabilization as you move toward the surface. Prior to breaking the surface of the water, rotate the victim to a face-up position by gently pushing the victim's arm that is closest to you down and away from you while pulling their other arm across the surface toward you. At the surface, position the victim's head close to the crook of your arm with the head in line with the body. Another lifeguard can place the rescue tube under your armpits for support. Quickly look, listen, and feel to check for breathing if the victim is unresponsive. If the victim is not breathing, immediately remove them from the water and provide care. If the victim is breathing, switch to an overarm head splint position before placing the victim on the backboard. When possible, move to shallow water to extricate the victim. To perform a head splint in extremely shallow water when the victim is face up, position yourself above and behind the victim's head. Bring the victim's arms alongside their head to provide inline stabilization. Quickly look, listen, and feel to check for breathing from your position above and behind the victim's head if they are unresponsive. Continue to monitor the victim's condition as you wait for help. If the victim is face down in extremely shallow water, position the victim's arms alongside their head, squeezing firmly to secure the victim's head between their arms. Roll the victim toward you, stepping above the victim's head and lowering your arm so that the victim's arms move over yours. Your hands will rotate as you turn the victim face up, so maintain pressure. Quickly look, listen, and feel to check for breathing from your position above and behind the victim's head if they are unresponsive. Continue to monitor their condition as you wait for help. In certain circumstances, you may need to provide inline stabilization using the head and chin support technique. You can use the head and chin support technique if a victim has one arm or you discover little flexibility in the shoulders. You can provide head and chin support for a victim who is face up or face down. To perform this skill on a face down victim, place one forearm along the victim's chest and the other forearm along the victim's spine. Squeeze your forearms together, clamping the victim's torso between them. Place one hand on the victim's lower jaw and the other on the back of the victim's head near the base of the skull. Do not place pressure on the victim's neck or touch the front or back of the victim's neck. Move the victim forward to raise their legs toward the surface and then submerge and roll under the victim. Quickly look, listen, and feel to check for breathing if they are unresponsive. Do not use this skill in water less than 3 feet deep with a face-down victim, because you could injure yourself or the victim when you submerge and roll under them. Spinal backboards are used to immobilize a victim so they are not further injured during extrication and transport. At least 2 lifeguards are needed to place and secure a victim on a backboard. The mechanics of using a spinal backboard are essentially the same in both deep and shallow water, although rescuers aren't able to stand in deep water. Remember, your priority is to care for any life-threatening conditions. If at any time during the procedure the victim is not breathing or has other life-threatening conditions, immediately remove the victim from the water and provide appropriate care. To place and secure a victim who is breathing on a backboard in shallow water, the rescuing lifeguard provides inline stabilization using the head splint technique and walks the victim toward the side of the pool while the assisting responder brings the backboard to the edge of the water. With head immobilizers removed, but within reaching distance, the assisting responder on deck places the board at an angle in the water against the wall, submerging the headspace of the board if possible. Using the overarm head splint, the rescuing lifeguard gently guides the victim onto the board, placing the victim's head on the designated headspace of the backboard. The assisting responder takes over inline stabilization by grasping the victim's arms between their shoulders and elbow, making sure that the board is secure on the pool edge. The rescuing lifeguard secures a strap high across the victim's chest and then stabilizes the victim by placing one hand and arm on the victim's chin and chest and the other hand and arm under the backboard as the assisting responder places the victim's arms across their chest. The assisting responder secures the victim's head to the backboard using the head immobilizer device and secures the head immobilizer by placing a strap across the victim's forehead. When the victim is secured, the rescuing lifeguard moves to the foot of the board while the assisting responder holds the backboard at the head of the board from the pool deck. The assisting responder signals and lifts the head of the backboard to the pool deck if necessary. The rescuing lifeguard pushes the backboard as the assisting lifeguard pulls. The assisting responder steps backward, then carefully lowers the backboard to the ground. Lifeguards assess the victim's condition and provide appropriate care. To place and secure a victim who is breathing on a backboard in deep water, use the same technique, but use rescue tubes to support the rescuing lifeguard and the backboard when necessary. Remember, whenever possible, move the victim to shallow water to backboard and extricate. Some facilities may feature pools with high edges or a large gap between the surface of the water and the pool deck. This can make spinal backboarding and extrication more challenging. In situations like this, lifeguards use a similar technique, but the assisting responder enters the water instead of remaining on the deck. The assisting responder removes the head immobilizer device and places it within reaching distance on the pool deck, then enters the water and submerges the backboard. The assisting responder positions the board under the designated headspace. The rescuing lifeguard maintains inline stabilization while both lifeguards move the victim and backboard to the side of the pool. Once at the side of the pool, the assisting responder positions a rescue tube under the head of the backboard for support, then takes over inline stabilization by placing both hands on the victim's arms and applying pressure. The rescuing lifeguard secures a strap high across the victim's chest and then stabilizes the victim by placing one hand and arm on the victim's chin and chest and the other hand and arm under the backboard. The assisting responder then lowers the victim's arms, then secures the victim's head to the backboard using the head immobilizer device and strap across the victim's forehead. After placing the head immobilizer and forehead strap, the assisting responder holds the backboard at the head while the rescuing lifeguard exits the water. The assisting responder passes the backboard to the rescuing lifeguard who is now on the pool deck, then moves to the foot of the board. The rescuing lifeguard signals and lifts the head of the backboard to the pool deck.
1, 2, 3.
Once the head of the backboard is on the deck, the rescuing lifeguard signals again,
1, 2, 3.
And the assisting responder pushes the backboard as the rescuing lifeguard pulls. The rescuing lifeguard steps backward, then carefully lowers the backboard to the ground. Lifeguards assess the victim's condition and provide appropriate care.
As a lifeguard, you must always be prepared to enter the water and make a rescue. When you notice that someone in the water needs help, follow this general procedure. First, activate the emergency action plan. Next, enter the water if necessary and approach the victim. Perform an appropriate rescue. Move the victim to a safe exit point and remove them from the water. Provide emergency care as needed and report, advise, and release. We will discuss this general procedure throughout the course, but we'll begin by discussing entries and approaches. Entries and approaches are designed to get you into the water and to the victim as safely and quickly as possible. To decide which entry to use, consider the depth of the water, the height of your lifeguard station, obstacles in the water, the victim's location, and the victim's condition. A slide-in entry may be used if the water is shallow, the pool is crowded, or you suspect a head, neck, or spinal injury. To perform a slide-in entry, sit on the edge of the pool deck and face the water, placing the rescue tube on the pool deck or in the water. Lower your body, feet first, into the water. Then, grab your rescue tube. Immediately position the rescue tube across your chest and secure it under your armpits. Maintain focus on the victim and begin your approach. In this case, a walking approach is used. Enter the water using a stride jump when you're less than 3 feet above the water surface and the water where you'll enter is at least 5 feet deep. Perform a stride jump by first squeezing the rescue tube across your chest and under your armpits, holding the tube's excess line. Lean slightly forward with your chest ahead of your hips and focus on the victim as you leap into the water with one leg forward and one leg back. Use a scissor motion to squeeze your legs together in the water, which provides an upward thrust to limit submersion. Hold the excess line so it doesn't get caught on anything, and keep your sight on the victim to begin your approach. In this example, a modified front crawl is used. In shallow water, a compact jump may be used to enter the water from the deck or from low heights. For entry heights above 3 feet, the water depth should be at least 5 feet to avoid forceful contact with the bottom. To perform the compact jump, tightly squeeze the rescue tube across your chest and under your armpits. Hold the excess line so it doesn't get caught in anything, and jump out and away. Focus on keeping your knees bent and your feet together and flat in the water, which will help you absorb the shock if you hit the bottom. Allow the rescue tube to bring you back to the surface. When you surface, re-establish your line of sight on the victim and begin your approach. In this instance, a modified breaststroke is used. Remember that entering the water from an elevated stand may not be safe if your zone is crowded or the stand's position or design makes a jump risky. If a jump is unsafe, climb down the stand and enter from ground level. Use the run and swim entry to enter the water from a gradual slope with a zero depth edge, like at a wave pool or a natural shoreline. To perform a run and swim entry, securely hold your rescue tube and excess line as you run into the water, lifting your knees high to keep from falling. At the point you can no longer run, place the rescue tube across your chest and under your arms as you lean forward and begin swimming towards the victim. Alternatively, you can drop the rescue tube into the water and begin swimming, letting it trail behind you. Do not dive or plunge headfirst into the water, as this could cause a serious head, neck, or spinal injury. The objective of a rescue approach is to safely, quickly, and effectively move towards the victim in the water. In most cases, the best way to approach a victim is to swim towards him or her with your rescue tube under your armpits and torso. Use a modified breaststroke or front crawl and keep your head up with the victim in sight. As you swim, maintain control of the rescue tube. If, however, the tube slips out from under you, let it trail behind you. Then, without taking your eyes off the victim, reposition the tube in front of you just before making contact with the victim. You can also let the tube trail behind you as you approach a victim if the swim is a longer distance. Again, you would reposition the tube in front of you just before reaching the victim. If the victim is in shallow water, it may be faster and more efficient to walk to them. Walk as quickly as possible. If necessary, position the tube in front of you just before making contact with the victim. Practice performing an entry with an approach as well, doing both together as you would in a real emergency. Performing entries and approaches together will help you master the smooth transitions needed for fast and efficient rescues. If the victim is in extreme shallow water, the fastest way to approach the victim may be to quickly walk or run to them. If you are using a rescue tube, position it in front of you just before making contact with the victim. The objective of an assist or rescue at or near the surface of the water is to quickly create and maintain effective support for the victim while moving the person to safety. An assist enables you to quickly and safely help a victim who is struggling in shallow water or within reach from the water's edge. The common assists include the reaching assist from the deck and the simple assist. A reaching assist can be fast and effective and is used when the victim is near the side and is able to grasp the rescue tube. Remove the rescue tube strap from your shoulder. Brace yourself on the deck. Keep your body weight on your back foot and crouch to avoid being pulled into the water. Holding the shoulder strap in one hand, extend the tube to the victim with the other hand and tell them to grab it. Slowly pull the victim to safety. Remember to communicate with the victim throughout the assist.
All right, grab onto the wall.
The simple assist is commonly used to help a victim in shallow water regain their balance. To perform a simple assist, keep your rescue tube, if you are using one, between yourself and the victim as you approach. Reach across the tube if you're using one and grasp the victim at the armpit to help them regain balance. If needed, help them to safety. You can also approach a victim in need of a simple assist from behind. Again, grasp the victim under the armpits and help them regain their balance. In water depths of less than 3 feet, a rescue tube may not be needed. Simply approach the person and help them regain balance by grasping them under the armpits. When rescuing an active victim who is close to the surface of the water, your objective is to support the victim as quickly as possible with the rescue tube before they submerge. Once supported by the tube, you can then move them to safety. To perform this rescue, approach the victim from the front. Just before reaching the victim, push the rescue tube out in front of you with both hands, kicking to maintain momentum until you reach the victim. Use both hands to thrust the rescue tube partially underwater and into the victim's chest, giving them support. Tell the victim to lean forward on the tube. Fully extend your arms and lock your elbows, then kick to move the victim through the water. Continue to reassure the victim as you move them to a safe exit point.
All right, turn and grab the wall for me.
Alternatively, use the active victim rear rescue when the victim is facing away from you. To perform the active victim rear rescue, approach the victim from behind with a rescue tube across your chest and under your arms. With both arms over the tube, reach under the victim's armpits and grasp their shoulders firmly. Squeeze the rescue tube between your chest and the victim's back, then lean back, keeping your head to the side to avoid being hit by the victim's head. Pull the victim up onto the rescue tube, ensuring that the victim is supported so that their mouth and nose are out of the water. Tell the victim that you're there to help, and continue to reassure them as you tow them to a safe exit point. Multiple lifeguards should respond whenever there is more than one victim. However, if you are the first lifeguard to arrive at 2 victims, provide initial support using a technique that is similar to the active victim rear rescue. Approach one victim from behind. With both arms, reach under the victim's armpits and grasp their shoulders. Squeeze the rescue tube between your chest and the victim's back, keeping your head to one side of the victim's head. Use the rescue tube to support both victims with their mouths and noses out of the water. Talk to the victims to help reassure them. Support both victims until other lifeguards arrive or the victims become calm enough to assist with moving to a safe exit point. If more than one lifeguard responds, the second lifeguard supports the second victim with their tube. Work together to convince the victims to separate, then move them both to safety. Sometimes, a drowning victim can be at or near the surface of the water, but face down and unresponsive. Unless you suspect a head, neck, or spinal injury, use a passive victim rescue to turn the victim face up. When approaching a face-down victim from the front, use the passive victim front rescue. Approach the victim from the front with the rescue tube across your chest. As you near the victim, reach one arm out towards the victim's opposite arm and grab the victim's forearm just above the wrist while grabbing the rescue tube with your other hand. Grasp the victim's opposite wrist and forearm with your palm facing up on the underside of the victim's arm. Pull and twist the victim's arm towards your opposite shoulder to turn the victim over on their back. As you pull and twist, thrust the rescue tube under the victim's back as they turn over. Place the tube under the victim, below the shoulders, so that the victim's head naturally falls back to an open airway position. Keep the victim's nose and mouth out of the water. Reach one arm over the victim's shoulder and grasp the rescue tube. Then use the other hand to stroke towards an exit point. Extricate the victim from the water, assess their condition, and provide appropriate care. When approaching a face-down victim from behind, use the passive victim rear rescue. Approach the victim from behind with the rescue tube across your chest. With both arms, reach under the victim's armpits and grasp the shoulders firmly. You may be high on the victim's back when doing this. Using your chest, squeeze the rescue tube between your chest and the victim's back. Keep your head to one side to avoid being hit by the victim's head if it moves backwards. Roll the victim over by dipping your shoulder and rolling onto your back so that the victim is face up on top of the rescue tube. Place the tube under the victim below the shoulders so that the victim's head naturally falls back to an open airway position. Keep the victim's nose and mouth out of the water. Reach one arm over the victim's shoulder and grasp the rescue tube. Use your other hand to stroke towards an exit point. Extricate the victim from the water, assess their condition, and provide appropriate care. If a victim is passive and face up near the surface in 3 feet of water or less, quickly walk or swim to the victim's side. If you are using a rescue tube, let go of it, but keep the strap around your shoulder. Grasp the victim's arms midway between the elbows and shoulders and move them up alongside their head. Grab the rescue tube if you are using one and position it under the victim's shoulders. The victim's head should naturally fall back into an open airway position. For a victim who is passive and face down near the surface in 3 feet of water or less, approach from the side. If you are using a rescue tube, let go of it, but keep the strap around your shoulder. Grasp the victim's arms midway between the elbows and the shoulders and move them up alongside his head. Glide the victim forward and roll the victim face up by pushing the victim's arm that is closest to you under the water while pulling the victim's other arm across the surface towards you. If you are using a rescue tube, position it under the victim's shoulders so that the victim's head falls back into an open airway position. In extremely shallow water, the water may be too shallow to glide the victim forward without causing injury. If this is the case, roll the victim to a face-up position by simultaneously lifting and rolling the victim over. As with all passive victim rescues, complete the water rescue by moving the victim to a safe exit point. In either shallow water or deep water, passive and active victims of drowning may sometimes sink below the surface and remain there. If a victim is submerged, your objective is to quickly and effectively make contact with them and bring them to the surface, supporting them on the rescue tube while maintaining an open airway. In shallow water, approach a passive submerged victim by quickly swimming or walking to their side. In shallow water, it may be quicker or easier to walk to the victim. With the straps still around your shoulder, let go of the rescue tube. Face the same direction as the victim. Reach down and grab the victim under the armpits, submerging yourself underwater if necessary. Pick the victim up while moving forward, rolling them over so that their face is out of the water. Position the rescue tube under the victim's shoulders so that their head falls back naturally, opening their airway. Move the victim to an exit point and extricate them from the water. Then, assess the victim's condition and provide appropriate care. In a deep water emergency, use a surface dive to quickly reach the depth necessary to access the submerged victim. There are two types of surface dives, the feet-first surface dive and the head-first surface dive. As a lifeguard, you must be able to perform both. To perform a feet-first surface dive, first, swim to a point at the surface of the water near where the victim is submerged. Keeping the strap around your shoulders, release the rescue tube. Position your body vertically in water. Push your hands down to your sides while you kick strongly, raising your body out of the water. Take a breath before letting your head and body sink beneath the surface. Force your body downward by sweeping your arms upward above your head, palms up. Keep your legs straight and together with your toes pointed. Tuck your chin to look towards the bottom. If you need to go deeper to reach the victim, bring your arms down alongside your body and repeat the upward sweeping motion of your arms. As with the feet-first surface dive, to perform a head-first surface dive, first swim to a point at the surface of the water near where the victim is submerged. Keeping the strap around your shoulders, release the rescue tube if necessary. Build your momentum with a swimming stroke and take a deep breath. Bring both arms along your thighs, tuck your chin, and bend at the hips as you reach downward through the water. Lift your legs straight and together out of the water. You should be fully extended, streamlined, and nearly vertical as the weight of your legs above the water drives you downward. To go deeper, do a simultaneous pull with both arms as many times as necessary until you reach the victim. To rescue an active or passive drowning victim submerged in deep water, first, perform a feet-first surface dive, positioning yourself directly behind the victim with your chest to their back. Reach one of your arms under their arm and across their chest, firmly holding on to the victim's opposite side. Once you have hold of the victim, reach up with your free hand and grasp the tow line. Pull it down and feed the line to the hand of the arm that is holding the victim. As you approach the surface, grasp and position the rescue tube so it's placed on the victim's back, below their shoulders. As you surface, ensure that the victim is positioned on the rescue tube and that their head is back and in an open airway position. Reach one arm over the victim's shoulder and grasp the rescue tube. Then use the other hand to quickly tow the victim to a safe exit point. Extricate the victim from the water, assess their condition, and provide appropriate care. Alternatively, a head-first surface dive may be used when performing the submerged victim rescue. Before making contact with the victim, you must change to a feet-first position so that you are directly behind the victim. After bringing a passive victim to the surface, extricate them from the water. You'll learn about extrication techniques in the next video. After you have brought a victim to the surface, sometimes the easiest and fastest way to extricate them from the water is to use a backboard.
Many different techniques are used to extricate a victim from the water. The technique you choose will depend on the victim's condition, your location, and the characteristics of the facility, such as a sloping entry or high edges. If the victim can walk, use the walking assist to extricate them from the water. Place one of the victim's arms around your neck and over your shoulder, grasping their wrist. Wrap your other arm around the victim's back or waist and maintain a firm grasp while you help them walk to safety. If the victim is unable to walk, the beach drag may be a safe and easy option. Once you reach shallow water, stand up behind the victim and move your rescue tube out of the way so you don't trip on it. Firmly grasp them under the armpits, supporting the victim's head as much as possible with your forearms, and walk backwards toward the shore. Drag the victim far enough so that they are completely out of the water. Lower them gently to the ground and assess the victim's condition and provide appropriate care. Do not use this technique if you suspect an injury to the head, neck, or spine unless the victim is not breathing. A beach drag can also be performed with two rescuers. Each lifeguard should grasp the victim under an armpit and support the head. For passive victims, after you have brought a victim to the surface, the easiest and fastest way to extricate the victim from the water is to use a backboard. The rescuing lifeguard swims with the victim toward the side of the pool while the assisting responder on deck brings the backboard to the edge of the water. The assisting responder places the board vertically in the water against the wall, submerging the headspace of the board if possible. The rescuing lifeguard approaches the backboard and raises one of the victim's arms so that the assisting responder can grasp the victim's arm. The rescuing lifeguard slides the rescue tube out from under the victim and towards themselves before the victim makes contact with the board. The assisting responder on deck firmly holds the backboard with one hand and the victim's wrist with their other hand, as the rescuing lifeguard stabilizes the backboard from the side. Once the victim is centered on the backboard, the assisting responder signals that they are ready to remove the victim and pulls the victim and backboard onto the deck. The rescuing lifeguard pushes the backboard as the assisting responder pulls. The assisting responder steps backward, then carefully lowers the backboard to the ground. Assess the victim's condition and provide appropriate care. If more than one on-deck responder is available to assist, they should help hold the backboard and pull it onto the deck. While aquatic attraction lifeguards, shallow water lifeguards, and other non-lifeguard members of the safety team are not trained to perform deep water rescues, they may still act as the assisting responder on deck when extricating a victim in deep water. When available, two assisting responders on deck may help to remove the victim and backboard from the water. Two lifeguards can also extricate a victim on a backboard using the steps. The rescuing lifeguard swims with the victim towards the side of the pool, while the assisting responder on the deck brings the backboard to the steps and removes the head immobilizer. The assisting responder then places the board in the water at an angle against the steps. The rescuing lifeguard approaches the backboard and moves to the side of the victim, while the assisting responder grasps the victim's wrist with one hand while holding the backboard with their other hand. The rescuing lifeguard stabilizes the backboard from the side, while the assisting responder firmly holds the backboard with one hand and the victim's wrist with the other hand. When the victim is centered on the backboard, the rescuing lifeguard moves to the foot of the board. When the assisting responder signals, they pull the backboard at an angle up the steps and onto the deck, while the rescuing lifeguard pushes the backboard. Once the victim is safely on the deck, assess their condition and provide appropriate care. Before choosing this method of exiting the water, consider factors such as the size and weight of the victim, the number of steps, your own physical abilities, and whether or not other lifeguards or assisting responders are available to assist with holding, lifting, carrying, and lowering the board. In some cases, it may be safer to use the pool edge method of removal instead. When extricating a passive drowning victim from an attraction with moving water and/or a steep staircase, such as a winding river, both lifeguards must enter the water. The rescuing lifeguard supports the victim in a face-up position with their arms extended alongside their head. In moving water, the rescuing lifeguard should position the victim so that their head is pointed upstream. This position will help keep the victim's body in alignment for easier placement of the backboard and reduce splashing of water onto the victim's face. The rescuing lifeguard supports the victim with their mouth and nose out of the water and walks towards the extrication point. The assisting lifeguard removes the head immobilizer from the backboard and guides the board into position under the victim as the rescuing lifeguard approaches. Each lifeguard uses one hand to grasp the victim's wrist and the other hand to hold the backboard. Lifeguards carefully and gently drag the backboard, taking one step at a time until they reach the top of the steps. Gently lower the backboard to the ground and provide appropriate care. When extricating a victim using a backboard in a zero-depth entry pool or waterfront, the rescuing lifeguard and assisting responder should both enter the water. After the assisting responder positions the backboard under the victim, both lifeguards move behind the victim's head. Each grasps one of the victim's wrists and one of the handholds of the backboard, lifting the head end of the backboard and gently dragging it out of the water. You may be able to lift a passive small victim out of the water to provide care if you do not suspect a head, neck, or spinal injury. Bring the victim to the side of the pool. With the victim on their back, rotate them into the crook of your arm, supporting their head above the water. Place your other arm under the victim's knees. Carefully lift the victim onto the deck or walk out of a zero-depth area and assess the victim and provide appropriate care. This technique can be used to remove a small, passive victim from shallow water if a backboard is not immediately available.
Despite your best preparation, situations do not always go as practiced. The following skills may help you deal with unexpected situations that may affect your safety or delay life-saving care. A rescue tube helps both you and the victim stay afloat. But if you lose control of your tube and a distressed swimmer or drowning victim grabs you, use one of the following skills to escape. If the victim grabs you from the front, perform a front head hold escape. Take a quick breath as soon as the victim grabs you. Tuck your chin down, turn your head to either side, grasp the victim's arms just above the elbows, raise your shoulders, and forcefully push up and away. If the victim does not let go, submerge with them. Grab the victim's arms just above the elbows and forcefully push up and away. Resurface and reposition your tube, then continue with the rescue. If the victim grabs you from behind, perform a rear head hold escape, following the same steps as the front head hold escape. As soon as the victim grabs hold of you, take a quick breath, tuck your chin down, turn your head to either side, raise your shoulders, and submerge with the victim. If the victim does not let go, grab their elbows and forcefully push up and away. Swim away from the victim, resurface, reposition your tube, then continue with the rescue. You should always remove a victim who is not breathing from the water immediately to provide care. But if you cannot do so and care will be delayed, you may need to provide in-water ventilations. To do so, ensure the rescue tube is placed under the victim so the airway falls into an open position. Position and seal the resuscitation mask from behind the victim's head. Use the jaw thrust with head extension technique to open the airway. Give ventilations as appropriate. If you are in deep water, use the rescue tube for support. Remove the victim from the water as soon as conditions will allow and immediately resume care.